for April 19th, 2023. I want to thank the representatives from the Land Bank for the previous discussion and get rolling here quickly on our second agenda item, which is a discussion and presentation from the Propane Education and Research Council. This demonstration and presentation has been set up by Ardent Solutions and Gwen Cooper. And what I'm going to do first is thank the representatives from Assemblyman Giglio's office, is Chief of Staff Joe Sempolinski. Hey, Joe. And Chief of Staff for Senator Barella, Austin Hunt. And Chief of Staff for Senator O'Mara, Sarah Ladin, and we thank all three of you for coming. And I know that Gwen and the staff at Ardent appreciate it as well. And so, Ms. Cooper, if you would like to do the heavy lifting here with the introductions of the rest of our guests, I'd appreciate it.
Good. So, good morning. I just want to take a couple of minutes to set the foundation of why we are all here today. We do have a lot of great information to get through, so I want to be, kind of quick with this part. I do want to make sure that we have enough time for some questions at the end. First, let me say thank you to every one of you here today. Really appreciate it. A special thank you to our guest speakers who came in all the way from South Carolina, Mr. Steve Wally and Mr. Derek Wally. They are father-son, but they do work for two different companies, and I will do some bios on them in just a minute here. So, as we all know, 4 years ago, New York State enacted the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. I'm guessing that every person in this room would agree that reducing emissions and fighting climate change is extremely important. In 2022, the cost of gasoline for Access Allegheny's public transportation system was almost 50% higher than what we had originally estimated. As the mobility managers for Allegheny County's public transportation system, it's our responsibility to look at the future of the entire public transportation system, find solutions that lower emissions, and also look at affordability, feasibility, and reliability. Through extensive research over the past year, we have taken into consideration infrastructure, overall cost, availability, environmental impacts, sustainability, return on investment, and performance mile range. With that said, one of the most viable options we have found is propane. Without getting in too deep, because I think our guest speakers will do a fantastic job explaining in detail why we have asked them to be here today, I just want to take a minute and introduce you to each of them, and then I'm just going to let them take over. So, Mr. Stephen Wally is the Director of Autogas Business Development for the Propane Education and Research Council. Mr. Wally manages the over-the-road market portfolio for PERC. It's also known as PERC. He is responsible for growing propane autogas market share for on-highway, light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles markets. He focuses on new product research and development, product launches, maintenance, and growth in existing market segments, as well as potential new market development opportunities. Before joining PERC in January of 2020, Mr. Wally ran his own clean transportation consulting company. His background also includes Eastern U.S. Regional Sales Manager for Agility Fuel Solutions, where he developed Class 7 and 8 vehicle fleet markets for natural gas. Mr. Wally was formerly a Director of Business Development for Roush Cleantech and performed autogas research and business development for Blossman Propane. He has a bachelor's degree in industrial arts education from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University and a master's degree in industrial education from Clemson University. He has a lifetime post-secondary teaching credentials from the state of California. I think I mentioned they are father-son, but they do work for two different companies. So Derek Wally is a member of the Roush Cleantech business and development team as of August 2013. Prior, he was working for Roush Partner Alliance Autogas in the Southeast market, setting up propane autogas refueling stations for propane-powered vehicles. Derek brings knowledge from hands-on experience, helping fleets to make the switch from hands-on experience, helping fleets, repeating myself, make the switch from conventional fuels over to clean energy solutions. The principal focus of his work with Roush CleanTech is promoting domestic clean energy sources as a clean alternative motor fuel for on-road engine platforms to public and private fleets across numerous platforms. So I'm going to cut this a little short. We don't have a lot of time. The one thing that I think is pretty cool that I will mention and add in here is if any of you have ever ridden any rides at Walt Disney World, part of Roush CleanTech, one of their areas is they design and make those rides. So all those super duper fancy rides that you get to take at Walt Disney World. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and let him get into the presentation.
Thank you. I was told that there might be a clicker here because I like to do clickers. Is there one around? 'Cause we're going to go. I'm very visual. I like to show a lot of pictures while I talk rather quickly. It'll make a little more sense that way, and we can go from there. While we're looking for a way to advance the slides, the Propane Education and Research Council was founded by Congress, enacted us into law in 1996 as part of the Clean Air Act as well. But in 1996, we began this organization, and we have one mission, and that is to promote the safe use of this domestic fuel that we have, propane. And we have more of it than any other country in the world. We produce more propane here in the United States than all the other countries on the planet. And because of that, we produce about 30 billion gallons of propane every year. Just to put it in that perspective, of all the transportation that we have, 40 billion gallons goes into the diesel market for transportation. So basically, we have 30 billion gallons of propane every year. We only use about 10 billion of it, and 20 billion of it goes overseas to countries all over the world that power 26 million propane vehicles worldwide. It's the third most popular motor fuel on the planet. Next to diesel, gasoline, and propane is the third most popular. Now, my job, if I did it really well, we'd be using more of that here in these United States, and less of it would be exported to other countries around the world. So you guys are going to help me out, and we'll start right here in New York. But the Propane Education Research Council, mostly we focus on education, safety, and this goes in all the markets for residential, for agriculture, for commercial, for forklifts. I mean, we used propane in forklifts back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Why? And we still use it today. But even before the EPA was set up in 1972 to regulate emissions and make sure that we were clean, we used propane in forklifts because if you use gasoline or diesel in an indoor warehouse, what happens? People die. Yes, and people die. So you use propane, and what happens? People don't die. So we had a little bit of sense even before the EPA was started in 1972, and it continues today because we have progressed with propane in over-the-road vehicles to make them very, very clean.
Steve, I'm impressed with your riff without having the presentation. Why don't
That's okay.
Why don't we do this for now?
We'll keep going.
Why don't you use our human clicker down there at the end and just let her know when you want to advance the slide?
Go ahead. We can get started.
While we can keep working on getting it going. But let's get the presentation going. I don't want you guys to run out of time.
No worries at all. Like I said, heavy on the pictures, but we reduce emissions and cost with propane. And the term autogas is used whenever we use propane in an over-the-road application. And we stole that from the rest of the world. That's, if you go to Europe, you go to a petro station, you'll find CNG, you'll find autogas, you'll find petro, all of it. But autogas is the worldwide term for the use of propane when it goes into vehicles. Let's go to the next slide. Here's some examples. We actually have thousands of paratransit vehicles nationwide that are operating on propane. We're in the, you're fine, you keep going. I'll keep up with you. You can go to the next slide. And we're in national parks, Acadia National Park up in Maine. We're in trolleys. These are all the people mover applications. You can keep going. From San Diego here in Pennsylvania, Transnet and CATA over in Erie. And we can go to the next one. And I'd like to show this because Maria Church at Transnet did this 2-minute video and talks a little bit about, look at me, all right, I'm happy. Now, how do I make the, whoops, that one didn't work. Here we go. Let's listen to what the folks at Transnet have to say. This is just
Transnet is a public transit company providing community transportation throughout Montgomery County. We provide a quality service for all of the residents of our county and our communities.
Eastern Pennsylvania Alliance for Clean Transportation. We are a Department of Energy sponsored organization that helps promote alternative fuels within the transportation sector. Transnet had kind of an unusual case. We analyzed their data, how much they traveled, how much fuel they used, what their routes were, and then we selected through a calculation tool that we have what would be the best alternative fuel for gasoline and diesel for them. And in this case, it happened to be propane.
To have our own fueling infrastructure for the propane vehicles, that made it a win-win.
When we're choosing new vehicles, we're looking for sustainability, number one. It's very important to our company.
Propane gives us the alternative of clean energy. At the same point in time, it's roughly about the same miles per gallon per vehicle, and the maintenance costs for propane and gasoline are about the same.
It's commonly known that alternative fuels exist. However, there's not a lot of experience with end users. So the training portion is we obviously pitch safety. It's one of the highest priorities with the station, with the vehicles itself.
Our cost for maintaining the bus is the exact same as if it would be fuel, but now we're running with a cleaner fuel.
These vehicles that you see are subject to a pretty arduous test. It's called Altoona testing, and it's done at Penn State or in conjunction with Penn State. And it puts them through a replicated duty cycle of a lifetime of the bus in this application. So it ensures that the vehicle is built properly, soundly, it's reliable, so that when it gets thrown into service, all the systems, including the fuel system, operates properly.
Transportation agencies like Transnet benefit from this because they have to use a vehicle that's a little bit larger and a little bit heavier, and they go very long distances. So they need something that's going to be able to accommodate that range, and propane does that.
We want to make an environmental impact. We want to do this job, but do as environmentally responsibly as possible.
Driving them is no different than the other buses that we have. It's obviously better for the environment.
We're able to come in and surprisingly be able to do it at a cost that's less than what they're doing on conventional fuels, but exceeding their sustainability goals.
I think Transnet does a great job of communication amongst all their partners and operators. They share information really well, and they really push the envelope in terms of alternative fuels, exploring what the possibilities are. You know, they're looking to bring, I think, the best experience and reduce their footprint in the communities they operate in, also with the clients that they serve. So alternative fuels has been something that they've done before, and they continue to push forward, and they're really paving the way for propane-powered vehicles in the state of Pennsylvania.
So what is this propane that's going in these vehicles? It's the exact same fuel that you put in your grill cylinder out on the back patio, okay? It's so clean we let it touch our food. But we also heat millions of homes nationwide with this. Again, we're doing forklifts, we have commercial mowers, we have farms for grain drying and incubation. All of this comes from the fuel that we produce here in these United States. Now, a lot of times we get confused with compressed natural gas, which is a sister fuel, natural gas. There's natural gas is methane, pentane, butane, propane, ethane. All of those come up out of our own U.S. soil, and propane is the heaviest of all of those. And we keep it at a liquid. As long as it's minus 42 degrees, it stays as a liquid. So I'm from Alaska, so on a really good cold day, we can carry it around in a bucket. But otherwise, we put it in a container and have about, on a 60-degree day, about 60 PS or 100 PSI at 60 degrees outside. So it's not much more than the pneumatic tools you have in your garage for working with it. It's heavier than air. So like gasoline and diesel, if it ever has an escape from a container, it goes down to the ground. It doesn't go up and have the methane detection and evacuation systems. It is a very hydrogen-rich fuel. We have 3 little carbon atoms that bind 8 hydrogen atoms together. So it's a very stable hydrogen fuel. Unlike gasoline and diesel, you see all those blue dots. Those are carbon atoms that are in those molecules, which makes it unacceptable for our emissions today. We have 2 sources of propane. It comes organically from our own ground, but then we also have a renewable propane that I'll talk about at the very end. But what's most important is both of them are the exact same molecular structure, and they're non-toxic. You can breathe it in and it won't hurt you. You can't contaminate the soil or water sources because it immediately evaporates, and it is not a greenhouse gas. So everybody has a pathway to zero. Diesel has working on a pathway to zero. They're having a little trouble with that. Gasoline has a pathway to zero. EV, electric vehicles have a pathway to zero. But make no mistake, nobody is at zero emissions, okay? Because emissions are created somewhere, even in the electric, may not be in the plug here, but it's at the power plant, okay? So emissions are created. So when we're talking about our pathway to zero, we're talking about a total life cycle analysis of an energy source. This is propane's pathway to zero. The 3 most talked about emissions, the 2 top ones are toxic to the people right there. Particulate matter that comes out of a tailpipe is toxic, responsible for a lot of the respiratory illnesses, along with NOx emissions. Those are the 2 that are toxic emissions. And on particulate matter, propane is so clean, we don't even put a particulate matter filter on a vehicle. Okay, so it doesn't even exist. You don't have to filter it out. You don't have to do anything with it because it's not there. NOx. Who remembers who busted Volkswagen for their NOx scandal? Anybody? Who busted them? Does anybody know who busted them? Oh, come on, West Virginia University students at Cafe. They busted Volkswagen for their NOx emissions. It was planned. Okay, so West Virginia University challenged me on my NOx emissions for propane-powered school buses compared to diesel. So you took a clean diesel bus and a propane bus, brand new, both of them, ran them for 2 months with their mobile emission equipment on there. This is their number. We were 96% cleaner than diesel just by using propane. On the greenhouse gases, that is not toxic, but it is a very dangerous emission, okay? Greenhouse gases, if you have too much of it, and on our planet, that goes up into, the atmosphere, then we're gonna have climate change that's not gonna be pretty, okay? But breathing in CO2, you guys are safe because the CO2 coming out of my mouth right here might be a little offensive, but it's not going to kill you. But it will hurt our planet if we have too much of it, okay? So we have to reduce greenhouse gases. But make sure we understand the difference between toxic emissions and greenhouse gases. All right, so fuel and maintenance cost reductions. That bottom line there is the propane pricing compared to other energy sources, including gasoline and diesel. It's very low, very stable, and it's because it's domestically produced. Here's where we're at nationwide. That's of April 14th. I guess that was last week. The colored zones and the price of propane, not for your residents, okay, not for your grill cylinder filling up at Ace Hardware, but when you buy propane in quantities that go into vehicles, these are the kind of prices that you see for those vehicles. There's also an alt fuel tax credit because we are part of the Clean Air Act. Propane is very clean. We get a 37 cents per gallon, and that's even for non-taxable entities. So school buses and paratransits all qualify for every gallon of propane that you use in that vehicle, you get 37 cents back. None of this stuff that operates on diesel, the scrubbers, the EGR, the NOx sensors, DEF, none of that exists. We actually meet the 2027 emission standards today with 0.02 NOx propane engines. And you don't have to upgrade your maintenance facility because it is heavier than air, so if you're already good for gasoline and diesel, you can operate propane. You don't have to spend $100,000 a bay, like you do with CNG. All right, we have lots of vehicles, but we're going to talk about the paratransit and the most popular ones. School buses, just so that you know, we have 22,000 school buses on the road today in the United States, moving over 1 million kids in over 1,000 school districts that have adopted. And once they get started, they don't stop. We now have dozens and dozens of fleets around the country who are now 100% propane in their vehicles. Even in 4,200 square miles in upper Minnesota, Kay Cornelius has 96% of her routes covered by propane. Just so that you know, I like to look at the scoreboard. EV buses and the Type C buses have been around for around 10 years. Propane buses have been around for about 10 years. We have 19,000 of them on the road, and there's just under 400 of the Type C electric school buses. This was as of June of last year. High growth markets, we're doing things with FedEx, UPS, DHL, the United States Postal Service now is all over this. We have food and beverage delivery. Nestle Water has over 1,000 of these moving very heavy loads. Paratransit, there's 51,000 of those vehicles out there, and we have about 4,000 of them on the road today operating on propane. Give you an idea, and shocker, I had to update this because the gasoline version of these vehicles going 300 miles, and the propane version of these vehicles going 300 miles. These are the national averages for the price of those vehicles today. They've gone up substantially because of the shortage of vehicles. Oh, and by the way, I have a fleet in New York. It's a commercial fleet that bought 50 EV vehicles. They have thousands of vehicles. They have hundreds of propane vehicles. But they did 25 vehicles in Southern California, and then they did 25 EV vehicles in the state of New York. Southern California, the weather was nice and it was fine. They met the 100-mile range that they were going at, but they lost 40% of their range in New York because of the cooler climate and how batteries operate in colder weather. Broward County down in Florida, Paul Strobus is one of my new best friends. He has 5 fueling stations and covers a very large, 471 square miles. But his NOx reductions, his CO2 reductions are phenomenal in their fleet. But this is the one I like the best, because if you can't be financially sustainable, you can't be environmentally sustainable, okay? Because you can be environmentally sustainable with a science project on a very low volume, but getting it pervasive throughout the entire process and fleet, that's what Broward County did over the last 7 years. They've adopted, there are over 300 propane vehicles now, he's all propane. That bottom right corner is $13 million in fuel cost savings alone for those 300 vehicles over those last 7 years compared to his gasoline. He compares it every single week. Kitsap in Tacoma, Washington, they joined me on a panel at a recent Green Summit. Look at the fuel cost per mile. They have the same vehicle on diesel, gasoline, and propane. Most of them, thankfully, are now propane, but they have a few diesel left and a few gasoline left. 50 cents a mile on gasoline, 48 cents a mile on diesel, and 20 cents a mile to operate on propane. Look at the greenhouse gas reductions that they've done. 2.4 metric tons on diesel, and the propane is 0.014 for their use. That's how much cleaner it is. All right, so infrastructure. How are you going to make these things work? Propane is a liquid. We get to move it around as a liquid. So we have these bobtail trucks in the city of Boston, 400 buses there. They had no room for infrastructure, so they needed mobile fueling to do that every single night. Propane can do that. We also have temporary. So if you need to set up temporary over here and move it around, of which Gwen might be able to, might be doing in the future and moving it around. But everybody wants their own fuel station. This is one in Georgia that just opened up a few weeks ago, and Gary is proudly showing it off. And this infrastructure was provided by the propane, it was the AmeriGas for this one, was provided to him at no cost when he entered into a 2-year fuel contract, so that he could, all they want to do is provide the fuel, and they give away the fuel station. This is CATA in Pennsylvania. Ohio Smart has about 125 of them, but everybody wants to have it right there at their location. If you want a little bit of comparison, that's about $50,000 worth of equipment for 25 vehicles. It's going to be about $700,000 for CNG to do the same amount. We have lots of different configurations. School buses that have hundreds and hundreds of buses have larger containers of fuel, but the exact same dispensers, so it's very scalable to make it happen. This is something relatively new. This is off-the-grid fueling infrastructure. This comes in on a skid, solar panels, and other energy sources so that you can run this without plugging into the grid. So you're not having to put in an electrical line to run the pumps. Here's one that actually fuels propane vehicles and charges EV vehicles. They're both off the grid. This is solar panel, wind, and a propane generator, which is very clean. So you have a microgrid for doing that, as well as filling up the propane vehicles. So you can do both. Just to give you a recap, that propane for that one was about 50 grand CNG on the time fill, a couple 100,000 electric is even more. These are the public propane fueling sites around the nation, almost 2,700 of them. The little red dots that you see encompassing Allegheny County here are public propane dispensing areas. If you're going more than 300 miles that you operate on your vehicle, outside that area, you can actually get fuel at these other places too. Very resilient. We move in pipelines, we move in rail cars, we move in transport trucks. But we have something no other energy source in the U.S. has, and that's an intermediate stage. In other words, we can store it in every community. You see those big white bulk plant propane containers. Our bobtail delivery trucks can pull fuel out of there and dispense it without any electricity. So if the lights go out, we can keep moving. All right, so where are we going? We've been around for a long time, but the future of propane auto gas is very bright. Just to give you a little bit of a lesson on the electric grid here first. The carbon intensity of the U.S. grid is 130. This is the EPA. This is not, me talking here. And this is how it's breaking down into the grams per megajoule. You have the electric doesn't naturally occur, so we have to generate it, and we have to use things to generate it: wind, solar, natural gas, coal, nuclear. When you combine all of those things and you go into the power plant and you go through the transmission, by the time you're all done, you have a carbon intensity of 130. You can see the carbon intensity of electricity, 130. You see it for gasoline, diesel, propane is 79. And when we use renewable on the far right, we get down as low as 20. Just gives you an idea of what it looks like nationwide. I'm sorry the numbers don't show up here real well, but New York has a very clean electric grid. Carbon intensity in New York is 83, okay? So when we use renewable propane, which comes from a lot of different renewable sources, when we take one of the medium-duty vehicles driving 200 miles a day for a year on propane compared to the exact same vehicle being charged from the grid, we're 86.3 metric tons of CO2 less than that electric vehicle. This is where it's being generated now. Everywhere where we're producing renewable diesel, we produce renewable propane. And as a matter of fact, I just went to a ribbon cutting this last year in upstate New York, where the first renewable propane rail cars were being brought in. So it's not something in the future, it's actually here and now. Just to recap, we're very low cost. We can be financially sustainable so that we can be very environmentally sustainable. I'm going to turn it over to Derek. He's actually going to talk about, oh, by the way, propane.com. If you want to look up any other information, we have all of our case studies, all of our information for all of our industries on propane.com. We're a nonprofit focusing on education, research, and development. But I'm going to turn it over to Derek, who's going to talk about the vehicles themselves.
Thank you, Steve. Impossible to follow, so I'm just going to set the expectation bar real low. Both physical height, I didn't get the 6'6" genes. My mother's Guatemalan, so I got the Guatemalan genes, so I'm a little bit of a hybrid. Thank you guys so much for allowing us to come up here. Like Steve said, I'm going to transition a little bit to a great, wonderful, clean domestic energy, and then who Roush is. If anyone's familiar of Jack Roush, I don't know if there's any NASCAR fans in the room, but Jack Roush is kind of the American dream. Grew up in an impoverished place in middle America, loved to tinker, translated really what he loved to do with engines and race, not just racing, making left turns on Sunday at NASCAR, but use that broad, hey, I have an engineering mechanical background, I'd like to use this same skill set and grow it. So as of today, we're about 5,000 employees around the world. That Jack, I'm one of those 5,000. I think I'm one of maybe 100 that aren't engineers, that don't have an engineering background, that somehow we sneak in there to be able to talk about some of the industry services that we do. We're located, I think, about 70 facilities around the world, still privately held by Jack, but most of our facilities are in the Motor City area, so the Detroit metro area, where we do a lot of different engineering services. Here are the 4 different divisions that we have. So Roush Industries is the behind the scenes that nobody really knows about what we do, whether we're doing a next generation military project that we can't talk about, whether that goes in the ocean, above the earth, in the sky, or combat vehicles that we deploy with a variety of different energy solutions, whether that's diesel, electric, hydrogen, natural gas. RFK is our Roush Kozlowski racing division, where we used to wear like the Yankees, right? Won a lot of rings back in the day, not so much now, right? Sorry for the Yankee fans in the room. Roush Performance, we do a lot of performance vehicles, but then Roush Cleantech is our newest division and is one of the few product services where we do, whether it's battery electric, hydrogen, compressed natural gas, or propane. So we're very fuel agnostic, but Jack likes to take a not what's trending on Twitter approach, but let's look at the entire life cycle, like Steve said, of the energies, and propane seems to win in all the categories. So whether you go to Disney and ride some of the rides, thank you for the shout out, not a lot of people know that. We do have facilities down there, so if anyone ever goes to Disney, you can always tour our facility as well, doing some pretty incredible stuff with the mobility space as well, defense, entertainment, and of course aerospace is probably the next most exciting, since people are trying to get to Mars, so we're working with different entities on how to do that. So one of the things that I love that Jack said, and he copied what Thomas Edison said, when someone asked Thomas Edison, how'd you make the light bulb? Anyone know what Thomas's response was? I like saying that like I knew him, but he said, I can tell you 300 or 3,000 ways how not to make a light bulb, right? So the way that we look at experience and knowledge is by failure, right? So he would race an engine, crash it. You know, he's survived over a dozen 2-plane crashes himself, so he can still fly and he can still drive, but he has hit the wall and the ground and water different times. But what we've done in the clean energy space has really anything from EV to hydrogen, even on the charging side of it, propane, natural gas, and then we even have some that are self-driving electric for agricultural to help with the labor crisis out in California, all the way to what we currently have today. Right now, our scorecard is we have 28,000 propane vehicles on the road with over 2 billion miles that are counted for since we started back in 2009. We have over 3,000 individual fleets, whether it's Rochester, Monroe County Public Works and the airport vehicles that are there, to the school districts here in New York and all over the country and in Canada as well that have been running. So we can speak to it, whether that's Acadia National Park or Denali National Park in a strip chassis, USPS and a Ford chassis, or that beautiful yellow Bluebird school bus that is running around that you can highlight there. So we are an OEM option. So Ford is basically, just to boil it down, anything behind the Ford Blue Oval falls under warranty. So we are not an aftermarket system that comes on later to hack the OEM on the vehicle and add something to it. Nope, this is straight OEM. So when the Ford engine is built, it comes specifically designed for a Roush fueling system on top of it, and it is all dedicated. We looked at doing a biofuel, runs on this, then can switch to this, but we decided, hey, for a lot of fleets, having a very, very clean energy source like propane in that engine to be able to meet Ford's 250,000 mile stress test duty cycle needed to happen. So I don't know if anyone cooks with gasoline or diesel. I don't recommend it, but we cook with propane and natural gas because the molecular makeup is so clean, we let it touch our food. We calibrate it specifically to run on propane within the ECM. So if anyone services vehicles, they can go to, whether it's their Ford dealer, they do warranty in-house, can plug that in to the OBD scan tool, and it'll come up Roush F750, E450 propane powered, right? So we want to make sure not just creating a great vehicle, but being able to service support it through the Ford warranty network. Here are our commercial deployments that we put on. So I'm gonna split it up into school bus and to just because I feel like it's worth mentioning for school bus. But on our commercial side of it, we have deployments all over the United States, Hawaii and Alaska. You might have seen some of our vehicles on the road, whether it's university, AAA, beer, bread companies. Schwann's up there. I like to give a great shout out to them because they've been running propane in their vehicles since Jimmy Carter was in office. Back in the oil embargo days, they said, never again are we going to be tied to a foreign oil and energy. We're going to use an energy that's domestic. They researched, they hunted it down. Propane was their fuel. They've got over 3,000 on the road, and we exclusively provide them with their vehicles and refrigerated units. Great ice cream, but also great meals. Didn't know that till COVID, right? We all kind of had to adjust because I can't cook. So some of these other vehicles that you guys can see here, whether it's ski resorts, airport shuttle, even some of the scissor lift catering companies at a lot of these airports, because the airports really don't have that great of a carbon footprint, so they're doing anything and everything that they can to be able to reduce their footprint at the airport as well. Now, this chart is something that we like to show, especially on Tuesday nights at the school boards, just to be able, when we only have about 30 seconds. This is a very fluid moving chart, and hydrogen is going to be on the right here, and that's going to start to come up in the next, I would say, months to years. It's pretty exciting to see how where everything was only gas and diesel, now we're starting to see a lot of different options to choose from. But when I said earlier, Jack doesn't follow trends, whether it was all natural gas or all electric or all this, it's not, and I'll use the CEO of Cummins' term, it's not a silver bullet, it's a silver buckshot, right? The transition and path to zero is going to take some time. It's not a light switch on the wall, it's a dial, right? And so what we like to do is, okay, ease of adoption, where does it come from? What's the emission footprint? Is it scalable for fueling infrastructure? Can it tie into existing data management systems and track it? Can technicians and mechanics work on it with ease? Is there training available? Can we scale? Because you can't flip a whole fleet to an energy source. It takes years, sometimes, a decade plus to switch over. And then how does it do in the cold? And propane checks all of those boxes. Some of our transit deployments, we're very, very happy with our transit deployment. It's probably our second fastest growing market outside of school bus because of there's a lot of climate goals that are out there. I'll pick on DART, which is the Delaware Area Regional Transit Authority. Their governor had some pretty aggressive goals that he wanted to. Notice I didn't say mandates, goals that he wanted to hit to for 2030. And because they switched to propane, they actually met those emission goals by 2018. So 300, they took a while to replace, but over 300 of their E450 transit public transportations are running on propane, and they're saving well over $1 million a year. But then their fixed route buses are CNG, right? And some are looking at a hybrid electric platform. So we're very passionate about all clean energies. We just feel like each of them have their appropriate application, and we feel like propane does a fantastic job for the medium-duty Class 4 through 7 shuttle bus application, and we have quite a few that are running out there today. I won't read through all this, but it has about a 300-mile range. It goes the exact same spot the propane tanks do where the gasoline tanks went, so it meets Canadian motor vehicle safety standards, American motor vehicle safety standards. We're not duct taping these to the roofs or shoving them underneath the floorboards or anything. This is not an episode of Hank Hill or some of the other YouTube guys. We do this very similar, exactly the way that the OEM does it on traditional conventional fuels. We are Altoona tested, which means we do get access to the FTA funds. So instead of the 80% to the 80-20 split, it's actually 85%. The FTA, Steve met with some of the gentlemen from FTA saying, hey, propane is considered a near zero emission engine, and we have the certification for it, whether it's Altoona, EPA, CARB, which I know we're in New York, so it's a CARB state. We meet those through 27 and beyond. So it's exciting to not only pull from federal funding that's available, but we also meet all of the regulatory first state and federal as well. E450 and the F550 as well. Got to give a shout out to my Bluebird friends as well. And Peggy is here as a New York native. She's helped deploy a lot of school buses here in the state of New York that I'll talk about as well. So right now we're dealing a little bit with a chassis shortage, right, and supply chain shortage. I'm sure you guys have probably seen or heard that. What we're doing now, a lot of different paratransit fleets that are out there that some of them are waiting for over 2 years for vehicles, right? And some even longer than that. So we're looking, and CATA is in Meadville, Pennsylvania, so not too far from the border, but they were actually saying, okay, we're waiting on new vehicles, but we would like to adopt this now. So we looked at gently used vehicles, gasoline vehicles that they had on the road, sent our mobile engineering service team on site, and two birds with one stone, upfitted their existing vehicles to run on propane, the ones that we thought we didn't want to look at some of their high mileage ones, we want to look at the low mileage ones, and got them on propane. And then when their new vehicles came in, those were available as well. And then we also use it as a training session as well. And that's something I'll get to at the end. But we don't just say, hey, here's the vehicle, good luck, have a great time. We have a pit crew behind. If there's one of me, there's like 20 behind me, whether it's technical hotline services, web-based training, hands-on training, workshops, onboard service center locations. We have a great team to be able to support afterwards. The reduction that I like to talk about, we heard about it from Transnet, but a lot of these different boards, a lot of different, whether it's school boards or in the transit world, are saying, hey, what are we doing as far as a climate plan? What are we doing as far as reducing our harmful emissions plan? And we want to be able to help and say, hey, for a lot of areas, electric may not be the choice, whether it's the grid is already strained, costs are out through, or the range because they have a lot of square miles to cover. We want to be able to say, hey, propane is a great option, and here's the scorecard that we can do for reducing emissions. Here in the great state of New York, we have over, I think it's closer to 600 now, Bluebird propane-powered Ford Roush. So the exact same technology that goes on our commercial application goes on them. And you can see them running all down the road in New York. They, I think, still hold the record for most individual school districts that have moved to propane as their energy source. And Peggy from New York Bus Sales is here. They do, they're a commercial dealer for school buses and for commercial vehicles as well. And Peggy has done a fantastic job and her team, and not only for the past 10 years gotten districts to move over to propane, but other schools like I know Depew up in Buffalo is just getting their first propane buses here in the next 12 months. So very exciting to see that these are very prevalent. This isn't something new that's entered. We've been getting after this for over 10 years. And this is a high level that we did last year, very conservatively just on fuel. Almost $10 million was saved. Over 1.1 million gallons of foreign oil was taken off the road by using a clean energy domestic propane fuel. And then also my favorite is the 22,000 harmful emissions were taken off. Because I don't know if you've seen a child, but they're about the same height as a school bus tailpipe, right? So we want to take those off the road as well. Funding. Like I talked about, 85-15, so we do get access to the DOT and the federal and state DOT funding, being a near zero emission engine. We have a lot of different private, so propane companies that are out there today in some areas that are like, hey, listen, we want to help as much as we can. So if there's no state federal funding and there's pennies are being tightened, we'll come in as a private entity, provide the fueling station at no cost, provide you, with the fuel at a certain price, and we'll even give you up to $5,000 per bus to be able to run this. Now, why would someone do this? Like Steve said, everyone that goes to propane stays in propane. So these energy companies like AmeriGas, and there's a few others that do this as well, will say, hey, even if we lose money up front, we want you guys to continue to use this product, and we know and we're confident that we will, because our retention rate, if you buy a propane vehicle, is over 90%. So pretty good. Like Steve said, we have a total cost of ownership calculator that we've worked with Gwen and Carrie and the team to be able to make sure that this made financial sense well before we came here, and I think we've been working for over a year now to make sure that the numbers line up. So we're very, very passionate and excited that propane stands on its own 2 feet even without any funding, because I know we are allocating a lot of funding from a country at certain different energy technologies, and we want to say, hey, those are great, we'll find those and we'll hunt those, but we want to make sure that we're doing it so it stands on its own 2 feet. Here's just some of the case studies we talked about. This is San Diego. They have well over 100. Some of the safety, a lot of people will watch I think it was Shooter with Mark Wahlberg, where he, might shoot a tank and the whole building blows up, the chopper blows up, and everything around. Science is fun, right? So that is not true in any sense of the word. In case you guys thought everything in Hollywood was true, that's not. We have a whole different presentation to talk about safety, and I won't do that today. But I will say the most intimidating group I've ever talked to were the fire department in Boston. Fantastic mustaches. I mean, make Tom Selleck look like he had just a little fuzz. They were like, no way, no how, it's never going to happen. We've got tunnels here. It's not going to happen. Long story short, Boston runs 500 now propane buses, and their DPW runs it. They even have landscaping vehicles that cut with propane mowers. And at the end of that presentation, the fire department said, wow, this is incredible. We thought you were just like an RV slapping them on the side and running them in. I said, no, we're a little bit better. And at the end, they said, do you guys do fire trucks? And I said, no, we don't. But I love the confidence. So we're very, very confident in coming out. And at no charge, we like to do firsthand first responder training with fire departments to say, hey, here's a commercial vehicle, here's a school bus, here's how you can identify that it is a propane vehicle, here's our technology, here's the redundancy, both electrical and mechanical shutoff in the case of an accident. Because if you notice, 2 billion miles is a lot of miles. There have been accidents. I'll just pick on the school buses. I don't know what shade of yellow we need to paint them so people don't hit them, but it's happened, whether it's a Prius or a tractor trailer. So, and they've stood up the test of time through all of that. We go above and beyond at Roush. We've actually engineered a certain services that test these tanks well times their actual duty cycle, and we've shared that with everyone in the propane industry and even our competitors, because safety shouldn't be something that should be patented. So we share that with everyone as well. So some of our customer success, like I talked about, we have a huge, extensive team. I think I mentioned 5,000 employees. We have dedicated service, field service engineering team all over the country and growing. We've actually added 2 more. The maintenance side of it, the only thing we add is a 50,000 miles. We recommend changing the fuel filter. Takes a matter of minutes, right? Everything else is exactly the way that Ford, which I think Ford in the transit world covers about 90% of the market share. So if you're running a Ford, everything is as you know what it is today on gasoline. Not to simplify Jack's $100 million investment into propane, but we pretty much carbon and copied everything that you're used to with gasoline into propane. Service network, we've got them all set up, but I think it's now over 800 different service centers that can handle propane vehicles, because like Steve said, we don't need to go into a bay that has all these different modifications. So in summary, very simple, very robust, no duty cycle compromise, right? We want to make this a very simple, easy transition for fleets and not upset the apple cart and change everything. Economically, Transnet, I know we haven't talked too much about the finances, but Transnet just let me know they're saving over $8,000 per vehicle per year, not including maintenance. That's just based on fuel. And a lot of these different fleets will lock in their propane price for a year. Some 2 as up as 3 years. How nice would that be from a business management to be able to say, I don't have to worry about what I'm paying for the next 3 years on my fuel bill. Oh, and by the way, the federal government for the past 15 years has provided a 37-cent per gallon tax credit. I don't think anyone's getting, paying out for diesel and gasoline vehicles, but for propane, they still want people to transition to a low-energy domestic fuel. So that was our presentation. I really appreciate everybody's time. And are we doing questions?
Questions.
We are doing questions. Yes,
Right.
sir.
Yeah, when you process this from natural gas and propane, where does the stuff go that you take out of that? I mean, you're getting rid of it, so.
Yeah, when we pull all these natural gases up out of the ground, they get segregated into various pipelines based on their specific gravity. And propane is the heaviest one. It comes out as a liquid. Methane is the lightest one, and it goes into those pipelines. But all of that gets,
So you're capturing that somehow. And
all of them
putting it
get captured.
someplace
Yep.
else.
Good
And
question.
I know they talk about capturing the carbon and putting it in the ground and stuff like that. So
Well, yeah, methane is actually a greenhouse gas, and it's about 6 times more of a greenhouse gas than CO2 is. So we have to be very careful with methane escape. Propane is not a greenhouse gas.
And a great question about propane, talk about the ground. So one of the reasons we were able to put a propane station, not for the school buses, but for Boston's Department of Public Works, they wouldn't even allow gasoline and diesel in downtown Boston, but they would allow propane, because propane is non-toxic, non-corrosive, non-carcinogenic, doesn't contaminate water, doesn't contaminate fuel, and it lasts forever. So there's no additives in the winter, none of that. So we actually get to put propane in places that we can't even put gasoline and diesel infrastructure.
What's your nearest propane refinery?
I'm sorry?
Refinery.
What's the nearest refinery you have to us?
The Marcellus Shale is one of the largest around. We have more natural gases that we haven't even touched. Hundreds of years worth of energy source right up underneath our ground. But Marcellus is probably the closest.
Well, but where do you make the propane? Refinery.
It doesn't get refined. It's clean.
There's 2 ways of making propane, though, correct?
With the renewable propane, yes. Thank you. I was thinking of the organic propane. Renewable propane refineries, right now, the first one that came on the market was REG out of Louisiana. They were the first to start doing renewable diesel. And so when you take feedstocks that are clean to make renewable diesel, a byproduct of that refining of it is propane. They can't not make it. So about 6% of all the renewable diesel that's made turns into renewable propane. And we're able to move that through rail cars, through transport trucks, and take it wherever. But we have now about 20 more refineries coming online this year and next year.
Okay, and for the natural propane, you just have a facility that process is it in bottles? Is that or whatever?
Yeah, we put it into pipelines. We go into rail cars at rail car stations, and then we go into transport trucks. It's one of the most versatile fuels to move around.
So we actually used to just burn it off about 100+ years ago. That blue flame and top of the refineries, they're like, we don't know what to do with this, let's burn it off, until someone was like, hey, maybe we take this energy, capture it, and then fast forward 100 some years later, this is not just your backyard barbecue grill, backup generator, home heat, home cooking. It's even actually put on marine cargo ships. So instead of it running on diesel or some other type of fuel, they'll actually put a 18 or 30,000 gallon tank on the deck of a cargo ship and send it across the ocean that's powered by propane. So there's a lot of different ways, but what's nice is kind of like the remora fish that stays underneath the belly of a shark and just mooches off everything the shark does. Propane is a byproduct of petroleum refinery, natural gas refinement, and now with renewable coming from renewable sources as well. So
It's naturally produced propane is produced, comes out of the Marcellus shale formation, or is it below that in where a lot of the other wet gases come from?
So there's a great YouTube video, but I'll try and summarize it. So since hydrofracking became this revolutionary technology, and I've met some of the families out in western Pennsylvania. So when the company comes in, and my neighbor was an environmental lawyer, and he was telling me incredible, like how this has changed since, a lot of things have gotten better since the way we did things probably 50 years ago. But what happened is they go into the ground and then they go out. So the hydro water fracking comes out and they pull every single gas underneath there. So like he said, methane, butane, pentane, propane, they pull all these gases up, out, and then they segregate them where they need to. And then with propane, because it's under very, very low pressure, can be put in as a liquid, they can transport that a lot of ways. Other fuels don't necessarily have those benefits. They have to get transported other ways, but propane's a byproduct out of wherever we find a lot of different energy sources.
So we should be fracking here in New York. That's what you're saying.
Is this my personal opinion, or is this the... Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
Avoid it.
Sorry.
Legislator Burdick,
Now,
over.
a lot of times questions will come up, well, propane's a fossil fuel, so it's got to be dirty, okay? But all fossil fuels are not created equal, okay? Methane and propane, as you see all them in the molecular structure, are very clean. Now, coal and oil and even wood is much dirtier when you burn it in a fireplace. It has more particulate matter and other NOx emissions than anybody else.
So we haven't had the question yet that I warned Gwen was coming, but I have a feeling it might be coming. I'm going to go to Legislator Burdick on your left here.
Well, as you know, New York State has established these mandates for going all green and electric. You never hear them talking about propane or hydrogen. And I know, being to some seminars, that they say, well, things will change for buses because it's going to be so expensive to convert them to electric, and there'll be money, which is still taxpayer money, to fund all this. Why isn't it being discussed more to convert to propane instead of all electric, and the
Actually,
grid can't handle it?
Yeah, in the infrastructure law, we have the EPA administering all the funds. There's $5 billion carved out just for clean school buses. And propane and EV are both in there. And so you get both of them. Now, granted, we're just a small little propane education and research council with a little bit of money every year. We can't compete with the public utility commissions for EV and for natural gas. I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into that promotion. Wherever we get a voice, wherever we're able to establish and get a fleet going, then they usually tell all their friends and make it happen.
So a follow-up question, if I could. The concern, I think, among this board will be, should we make investment like this towards a technology that we will not be permitted to use in the near future? Hochul wants all school buses EV by 2035. Is it worth our time to make a transition to propane, knowing that it's not sustainable for?
I will say this: we meet all of the EPA and CARB regulations through 2027 and beyond. Now, a lot of the mandates that we've seen come out have been walked back by lots of different organizations. Because once you find out how much it really costs to put in the EV infrastructure and the cost of the EV vehicles and where those minerals and sources come from to make batteries, people are rethinking that.
So I think I can touch on a little bit on both of these questions as far as New York is concerned. You know, these guys aren't specific to New York and what's coming down the pike for us. I do want to say there was an article that came out recently that is potentially, I don't know if backtracking is the appropriate word, but I have done a lot of research, and I'm looking at it more specific to public transit because that's what I do on a daily basis. But there are a lot of information out there on school buses, a lot of comparisons and whatnot. And if you look on Steve's website, there's a great comparison on there. It does compare school buses, but it's all relevant, right? So, but for public transit, we'll say there's not a cutaway bus that I can get that's electric right now. So it's not even an option. They were going to start testing an electric one. And I'm not sure exactly where that is, but that was in like the very beginning stages of just testing it. The other problem is that they're 2 to 3 times the cost of what one of our buses costs right now. And that price has only gone up. We all know the price of everything's gone through the roof. Where else was I going with this?
John Broden with FTA. He, with the FTA funds, I was just at a SWATA conference. It was 8 states that were all GWINs out there. And John Broden from the FTA came and he was talking about the funding. And there's low and there's no. You've heard of low, no. There's low and there's no. And there was $1.25 billion set aside just for the low. Now, when we say low, we're talking near zero, 0.02 compared to 0.2, which it is now, so it's 90% cleaner. But there's money carved out just for that.
Gwen, you had mentioned in an earlier conversation with me that the return on investment of immediate transition to propane would be found prior to any deadline established by the state, if it's 2027 or 2035. Is that true?
Right, so our return on investment for what it would cost, and again, I'm talking public transit, but this kind of goes across the board, would be less than 2 years for what we would have to invest in each bus to what we would save. The other thing that I really wanted to mention, a couple of things, is first of all, it would take us 3 buses for every 1 bus that we run today. So, you know, if our bus goes out 50 miles. If our bus goes out 50 miles, and of course we're a pretty large county, you know, it would not get back to the parking lot if it was electric. We would need 3 buses for every single 1 bus. So we're paying triple the price. A couple of other aspects is we don't have the infrastructure for it right now. And I'm not saying that this isn't for the future and that we're not working towards this. We're looking at this right now because, like I said earlier, our gasoline expense was 50% higher, and we know gasoline prices went through the roof. They've come down. It looks like they're starting to go back up a little bit. But it's well worth it. Our buses don't last a really long time because of the number of miles that we put on them. So that would be, you know, our ROI being less than 2 years would be huge, and we would be able to save a lot of money. What else did you ask me? I'm sorry.
That's it. Just talking return on investment, but I see Legislator Sear has a question or comment.
Sure. Hi, guys.
Hey, I just got a couple of questions. So my background's in construction and trucking, so it's not a matter of if something breaks, it's a matter of when. I might have a little concerns about the background of repair shops around here to repair propane vehicles or technicians that can do it. And I'll just ask both questions to make it quicker. And then what is the lifespan on the tanks or the systems in these, you know, to recertify them, or is there an inspection date, or how often do you have to change them out?
Yeah, I'll do the second one first.
Thank you.
Lifetime. Most of the inspection that you're referring to is on a CNG tank. Because it's 3,600 PSI, and the carbon fiber wrapped tanks have to be inspected every 2 years, you know, and they have a life cycle that they have to, you know, end. You know, it used to be 12, I think it gone up to 20 years now. Ours are for the life of the vehicle. It's steel. It's only going up to 250 psi at the most, but on a 60-degree day, it's about 100 psi. So containing 100 psi is way less expensive than containing 3,600 psi. As far as the maintenance on the vehicle, these are spark-ignited engines, not a diesel compression engine. You know, diesel mechanics are harder to come by and more expensive because they have a greater knowledge base. Propane is just like gasoline, and it is a spark-ignited engine. So anybody who's working on a gasoline engine can easily work on a propane engine. The only difference is the actual fuel injectors and the tank. Everything else is exactly the same for gasoline. Same valve, same thing. We just funded, I funded Jack Roush, our organization funded Jack Roush in 2006 to do this fueling system for Ford. And now he turned it into a business and quite a good one. We funded Cummins about 4 years ago. And now Cummins in 2025 Cummins is the largest engine manufacturer in the world. And they now are producing a propane engine that's going to come out in 2025. Now, it's the largest engine producer in the world who's done electric, natural gas, EV, all of those, and hydrogen. If they pick propane, they're doing it for a reason. They can meet all of the emission standards of 2027 and beyond by doing it. And you can do it with a mechanic that's less expensive and more of them than you can with diesel.
Good question. And then also on the Roush side too, because it's Ford, Altoona tested, I have all the same exact meat certifications that a gasoline does. Wherever Gwen services her vehicles now, they could work on propane. In a lot of cases, people will prefer it just because of the emission. People even prefer fueling a propane vehicle over a diesel or a gasoline because it's almost a zero emission refueling process. With gasoline, diesel, nickel, dime, drip, drip on your feet, step, goes into your car, right? With propane, there's no spillage, there's no leakage, and it's a quick connect, push, 12, 15 gallons per minute, the exact same with gasoline and diesel. It's not a slow fill, time fill, trickle charge, DC fast charge or level 2 charge. The exact same cycle of transition and fueling with gas and diesel, same thing with propane. Good question, though. Yeah, the service and support, Jack, that's where most of our investment has gone into making sure. So Monroe County in Rochester, New York, they've been running our vehicles for over 10 years. Same tanks.
But let's do one more. Okay, we got two more quick questions, and we're up against lunch, and hoping you guys can maybe just stick around for a couple of minutes afterwards.
Oh,
People have more questions, but Dwight and then John.
Yeah, what does it cost to convert from gasoline or diesel to, diesel you couldn't, but from gasoline you can convert?
I'll go first because I'm an OEM side. We rarely do retrofits. We do now because of the supply chain of chassis, right? We go after gently used vehicles and we'll retrofit them. But our cost, if you were to rough numbers, if you were to look and specking out a brand new E450, shuttle bus, everything, we would add probably about $20,000 would be the cost to put in our tanks, our fueling system out the door. So if it's $100,000, which it's not, it's way more than that. But if it's $100,000 for a chassis on gasoline, it would be $120,000 on propane. But we're seeing an average of about $7,000 to $8,000 savings per vehicle per year just in fuel. So that ROI is under 3 years, worst case scenario, with no federal or state funding assistance whatsoever. And then I know there's some aftermarket kits that are out there that you could probably talk to.
Yeah, there's anything, from a technology point of view, anything that has a spark plug can run on propane. I mean, I've done backpack blowers, weed eaters, lawnmower.
Your truck?
Yeah, my personal truck. Anything that runs on a spark plug can run on propane. The air-fuel ratio is a little narrower than gasoline, so it's actually a little safer, but it still explodes. That's why we have the combustion engine, but it's very, very clean. So anything that runs on gasoline can run on propane. Roush in the OEM, it's a premium product. It's very good. You can get foreign aftermarket kits to do vehicles. The thing is you want to make sure that they're EPA, and if you're in a CARB state, CARB certified. If you do something that's outside of a certificate of conformity in the EPA, well, for one, it's illegal, and you don't want to do that. So you don't want to go cheap on this. You want to do it the right way. So on average, we're about 15% more than the gasoline vehicle on all of our solutions that are out there.
Another question?
Is the lifespan of the engine the same as a gasoline-powered engine?
Great question. So, yep, as of right now, 250,000 miles is what Ford and Roush does their stress test. Now, that's whether it runs on gasoline, actually even diesel now, because of all the after treatments being put on diesel engines, it's taking the life of that vehicle down, way, way down. Because, I mean, my brother has a 7.3, million-mile engine in his Excursion. That's pre-emission, right? That lasts a long time. Now, we're about the same. I mean, so most fleets don't keep their vehicles over 250,000 miles, but that's when Ford has started to see wear and tear start to happen. It doesn't mean it'll fail, but that's what it is. And what's crazy is if you replace a diesel engine, you're looking at about $25,000 to $30,000. If you replace a Ford engine, you're under $10,000. So we are better from a maintenance and from a total engine replacement cost than even diesel that's out there today. But good question.
So if I can just add a couple more things. Thank you for, sitting through this. And although I'm focused on public transit, I think that this, is a great conversation for lots of different things in our county. I do want to point out that there are lots of school buses in New York State that currently use propane. I did talk to Rush Henrietta School District, and they're at almost 100 of their buses running on propane right now. They're down to, he said, 5 or less diesel buses right now. But what I'm looking at is we would be the first public transit in New York State to potentially do this. I also want to add that we do have FTA and DOT, New York State DOT approval for this. We have some old funding that they are moving around for us. We're just waiting for that to come in. So I think, I could talk about this all day. I would love to talk about it all day if y'all had that much time, but I would be happy to answer any questions. I've literally, really spent a lot of time over the last year researching this, and would love to talk about it with any one of you. So thank you again for being here.
Well, thanks, Gwen and Steve and Derek. Appreciate you coming up all the way from South Carolina to give this presentation. And I'm sorry, Carrie in the back, Whitwood in the back, who did a lot of work setting this up, Executive Director of Ardent Solutions. Thank you for all the work you did to set this up. And as I mentioned, if you guys could stick around for a couple minutes and have more conversations. Our county administrator in the back is very familiar with this subject and meets frequently with Gwen, and I'm confident that in the near future we can get something to the board where we can make some good informed decisions. Also, thanks again to the state staff members for coming this afternoon. And if there's nothing else, would anyone care to make a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, as there appears to be no other business to come before the committee of the whole today, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Legislator Rumfeld and seconded by Legislator Hanchett. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, and we are adjourned.